All right, guys, so here we're working on inscribed figures. This is where we have a figure, a shape inside a shape, and we're trying to go ahead and find the area of the gray region. And we're going to round our answer to the nearest, we're going to round our answers to the nearest tenth in this one. Okay, so I have a circle and I have a rectangle inside that circle. And what I want you guys to look at is, in order for me to find the gray region, I'm taking the rectangle, the area of the rectangle, out of the area of the circle. Okay, so I'm taking it out. All right. So if whenever we're taking something out, we know that eventually we're going to have to do some subtraction. Okay. All right. So that's going to be something we have to do. We're taking it because we're taking it out. We're going to take it away. Okay. The drawing might not be exactly perfect, but we're going to assume that the four corners of this rectangle hit the outside of our circle, okay? And therefore, that would make this 35-foot dotted line identify our diameter, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say, okay, I know the diameter of my circle is 35. Okay, and then this is stuff for our circle, and I always want to also figure out my radius, but I don't have my radius identified for me yet. Okay, so we might have to figure out that radius. Okay, and then for my parallelogram, my rectangle, I have a length of 30. And I have a width of 18. Okay. All right. Real quick, since we're finding the area of the circle, and we know that area of the circle is pi r squared. Pi r squared. I need to find my radius. And in order to do that, we know that if the diameter is all the way across, or the whole distance across the circle, the radius is half that. So all I have to do is do my 35 divided by 2. To get my radius first. And 35 divided by 2 is 17 and a half, 17.5. Okay, so I have everything I'm going to need to find my area. Okay, I have everything I'm going to need to find my areas, and I'm going to put up here just so that I have it to reference to, that I know the area of a rectangle is length times width. Okay, just so that I know that I have all that reference. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is, I always like to go with the dominant figure, which ends up being the circle because it's bigger, so that makes it more dominant. Okay, obviously a bigger figure is more dominant than a smaller figure. And I'm going to find the area of that first. So in that case, that's the area of my circle. And I look over here to reference, okay, area of circle is pi times radius squared. For pi, we're going to use 3.14 unless we're told to use something different. Okay, and then we're going to take our radius squared. Okay, 17.5. We're going to square that. Okay, and I'm going to move this down 3.14. Now, 17.5 squared, that means 17.5 times itself. Okay, so 17.5 times 17.5. That's what the squared means. Okay, All right, don't get that confused with anything else. Squared means we're multiplying the number by itself. Okay, so 17, when I do 17.5 times 17.5, I'll subscript it here too. So 17.5 times 17.5, because I think this is an important step that some students get confused on, or they try to do something different, right? 17.5 times itself, and when we do 17.5 times itself, we're going to multiply 3.14 by 306. .25. Okay, and we're going to go, when we go ahead and multiply that out, again, you can always do the long multiplication, but when you're working with numbers like this, I don't think that it's a super big deal to go ahead and use a calculator. If you want to use a calculator, use a calculator. That's what it's there for. It's a tool, okay? But you could longhand it out too. But when I do that, I go ahead and I get 961.6363. And that's my number rounded, okay? I think it's really 961.625, okay? But the 5 rounds that to the hundredth rounds the tenth, the thousandth rounds the tenth to a 3, because we're looking to round to the nearest tenth. Okay, and let's make sure we're labeling appropriately that this is feet squared. Okay, so we got that. Now we need to go ahead and we need to find the area of our rectangle. Okay, so for area of the rectangle, we have a reference up here, that's length times width. And so I'm going to do 30 times 18. And when I do 30 times 18, I get 540. And 540 feet squared. Okay. All right. So now I know the area of my circle and I know the area of my rectangle. And I go back up here and I remind myself, hey, I was taking areas out, so I'm going to subtract. Okay. One thing to remember in this, guys, is whenever we're subtracting, going to subtract the two, subtract the bigger from the smaller. Okay. Sometimes I get students who will subtract the smaller from the bigger and they get negative. In a situation, we're never going to end up getting a negative area. Okay, that's not something that's possible on planet Earth, to get a negative area of something. Okay, maybe if we got sucked into a black hole where everything gets flipped around, we can work with negative areas, but there's no reason to think that we'll ever get a negative area. So always say, hey, I'm going to obviously take my bigger area and I'm going to take the smaller one out of that. Okay, so to finish off, we're going to go 961.63 minus 540. And the other reason this makes sense is because we're taking the circle, the area of the circle, and we're taking the rectangle out of it. Okay? So that's another reason that this makes sense. And when we go ahead and do that, we get 421 0.63 feet squared. So that is the area of the gray section rounded to the nearest tenth. Okay? All right, so I hope that helps. For those of you who are in my class, I hope that that's what you got when you guys did this. Till next time, be safe, be healthy.